as long as we're illuminating the subject with flash, should we bother subtracting top light? Let's find out. There was quite a lot of top light here, and not much light coming directly at her. So with the camera and flash set to no compensation, we got light into the front of her face, but the top light is still bright on her forehead. Increasing the strobe by one stop helped, but then the background that isn't lit by our softbox goes too dark. Let's set up our El Gobo to take away some of that evil top light. Then again, setting the camera and flash to no compensation, we get a very nice result. Comparing the same flash settings without and with the gobo shows that it does help. Otherwise, without the gobo, you have to use more flash to overpower the bad light. How much flash does it take to have similar lighting on the subject? I'd say about one more stop of light. So the question of whether or not to use a gobo with flash depends on the ambient light on the subject. If it's relatively flat, then adding flash just creates a direction. But if the top light is causing trouble, then that light has to be eliminated first. Do you always have to block top light when using flash? No, not when the top light isn't very strong. But I'll show you when you must block it. This view shows what she'll be facing, a row of light-sucking trees. The only light left is straight up. That's when you need to block it for sure. Without any light control, you can see where the predominant light is coming from. With flash, but still without blocking the top light, we end up with a bright nose and other residual effects from the top spill. But when blocking that top light, we end up with a more controlled direction from only our flash. I don't care for bright foreheads and noses. Flash will decrease that, but not as much as blocking it in addition to flash. I was teaching at a school about this type of lighting, and we had some assistants there to hold the lighting devices that they had. So I'll share here the progression from beginning to end. We started here without fixing the light on an overcast day. Adding flash helped lighten her eyes, but as you can see, it's still not right, with the telltale bright nose and forehead. So let's bring in the gobo to block the overhead light. This is actually too low and blocked too much light, but even so it'll be fine when we add the flash. And sure enough, the small softbox added the facial light that we like. And once more, this compares the two flashed photos, without and then with the gobo. I mentioned that the gobo that they held was too low. Doing that takes away all the back hair lighting, and it can cause kind of a cutout look. So make sure that the height of the gobo is about the same size as the gobo, and that it's only as far back as the back of the head. Top gobo placement not only affects facial lighting, but also hair lighting. If the top gobo blocks ambient light from hitting the hair, the person can have a cut and pasted look. Hair needs to be lit by some of the ambient light. So starting with this image, we can see that although it's not awful, it'll be better if we control the lighting. We started with her mom holding a black panel over her, but this is a bit too close and far behind her as viewed from the camera. So I had her move to our right, closer to the camera, to let some skylight light up her hair. The facial lighting on her is very nice, but the gobo blocked too much light from her hair. Moving that gobo forward created a good compromise between the flattering facial light and hair light. This is a pullback on all the stuff I had to do for this guy. And a back view. And this is a panoramic back view showing the kind of place that I often work. Anyway, starting here with no light control, you can see the bad light. I tried just blocking the light to my right, but I didn't think that the light was flat enough yet. So then I blocked the light from our left by putting the gobo over the fence. Then finally I added my main softbox flash. I know I'm repeating this a lot, but it's a very important aspect of quality portrait lighting. I'll just let these run without comments. So when don't you have to block unflattering facial light? When there's very little light on the face, you don't have to block it. So I'd like to point out that we can take this concept of subtracting the top light too far. This is the pullback with the finished lighting setup for the next few photographs. And this is what it looked like from behind her. But look at what she's looking into. A dark tree, and there's already a pretty good blocker over her with that overhang. So this is what she looked like without any of that added blocking. And this is what she looked like with all of my subtracted devices. This is way darker than she needed to be. The flash could have easily overpowered that little residual light. The final image is just fine. But when I did this, I didn't know that I did not need to take it that far with subtracting all the external light. Here's an example to prove that. Her face isn't completely clean of bad light, but the intensity is pretty low. And sure enough, once I added the TTL softbox flash, she looks just fine. So the lesson here is that as long as the face is significantly darker than the surroundings, there's no need to subtract any more. Here's a pullback on this guy's lighting setup. The ambient light here was causing some ugly darkness on the front of his face. And I did this just to show that lightening the image wasn't going to fix anything. So going back to the first image, let's see what it'll take to make this better. Let's cut that light on his right, which is our left. I placed a gobo on the other side of that wire fence to cut the light on the side of his face, but so that there's still a bit of accent light. Then I just turned on the TTL softbox and let it do its thing. These are all in aperture preferred auto. If you can find an existing structure to block top light, your job is half done. This shows the telltale signs of light coming from straight above. Then she backed up under the gazebo roof. She's a little dark above the waist and the light is flatter. But when we replace that missing light above the waist with our softbox, all is good. Let's cover adding flash to the subject and blocking the overhead light. We'll start with a natural blocker. How do you make or find a high key image outside? You need to find a place that'll result in less light on the subject than is on the background. This arch in the tree blocked most of the light on the subject. I placed her there and then used a long lens to only see the high key background, which of course was intended to match her high key outfit. Then I fired a softbox strobe to establish the light on her. I set the camera on manual shutter speed and manual flash because I wanted a controllable exposure in this very unusual lighting situation, although it's very possible that automatic exposure could have nailed the exposure too. When we add light to the subject, the background that doesn't receive that same light becomes darker relative to the subject. But what if the subject is already brighter than the background? Her eyes were dark here, so I needed to lighten those eyes. I did that by adding flash. But then we end up with a much darker background than we might want. So the answer is to subtract light from the subject first. And I did that by backing her into the woods. I vignetted the final image in Photoshop. But the main point here is that in order to get light into her eyes without ending up with an excessively dark background, we have to first lighten that background. And the way I did that was to put the subject in darker light. So which side is the best place to put your main light? Do we follow the predominant light? Or do we place it opposite the predominant light? The left image is without adding light. The center is with light from the same direction. The right is with the softbox on the opposite side as the existing light. Putting the light on the same side as the predominant light results in a more natural look, yet with better light in her eyes. Putting the light on the other side caused confusion. We can do that, but then we'd need to either overpower the ambient light or make sure the light is flat on her face first. A woods is another place where flash is very helpful. Without flash, the only place we can work is on the edge of a woods. But flash extends our options. Here I placed him deep in the woods where I liked the background, but unfortunately the light was not good on his face. So I placed my softbox on the side of his face where the light was the worst, to overpower that problem. Next I placed him where I liked the background, but also under a thick tree branch, so I knew the softbox would be the only light I'd have to deal with. Firing the flash equal to the ambient exposure gave me a great result.